We open on Giovanni, who has just received a call. It's from Meteor, who reports to him that the mission was unsuccessful. Her team were all taken out pretty quickly. Even Gozu was no match despite Mega evolving his Aggron. She was the last standing for the most part, and while their associates had sent wave after wave of peons at this legendary, including a trainer who's working his way up in the Pokemon Championships, they were only able to subdue the legend for the moment. Full capture of the beast would take far more. Giovanni sighs, before asking if the other creature had been located once again. Motori responds, saying that they've narrowed its location down to being somewhere in Kalos, thanks to files from a small legendary hunting group who foolishly have made all information they gain practically free to the public. Giovanni smiles and tells her to return to HQ. Once the creature is back in their control, they can fulfill their end of the deal, before working on catching that legendary for themselves. With that, Meteor signs off. Giovanni makes another call, telling the person on the other end to see if Silphco has made another Master Ball, and if so, to pay them a little visit. Once the call is over, he leans back in his chair. Everything was going according to plan. We cut to Ash as he runs up to the Pokemon World Tournament building. It's time for another battle festival, and he's as ready as ever to increase his ranking in the World Championships. However, before he can go inside, he gets bulldozed over by some guy in his Lucario. Much to his surprise, this is actually Cameron, Ash's rival during a Unova League. Now, I know what you're thinking. Really, Electro? Of all characters, you brought back Cameron? Well, don't stop watching and unsubscribe just yet. I've got a plan, don't you worry. Anyways, back to the story. Cameron finally notices who he just knocked to the ground and apologizes for it, before the two begin to catch up. Cameron's actually stayed in Unova, training at a place called Black Tower. Luckily, when the new season of the Pokemon World Championships started, he managed to get signed up pretty early on, something he's pretty happy about. Thanks to many of the trainers at Black Tower being in the World Championships too, he was also able to slowly make his way up to the Great class, which Ash mentions he's in currently as well. They both compare ranks, and Cameron is shocked to find he's only 4 ranks above Ash. The two chuckle about how close they are in rank before Ash says he has to go get registered. Cameron gives him a confused look, saying he doesn't see why Ash is in such a hurry since the Battle Festival isn't until tomorrow. Sure, he'd rushed over as soon as he heard about it, but that was because he'd been made very aware that he tends to be late to things, and he wanted to change that. That's when Ash explains the Battle Festival is this very day, which is why so many people were there. Cameron and Lucario stare at it blankly, before Cameron frantically runs inside thinking he's late once again. Ash simply shrugs before chasing after him. The two get up to registration, only to bump into another familiar face. Virgil, the Pokemon Ranger and the winner of the Unova League conference they each participated in. The three say hi, and after Ash and Cameron get registered, the trio talk about how they've been. Virgil explains that he ended up joining the World Championships after his brother convinced him it would help him become a better trainer, and by extension, a better Pokemon Ranger. Cameron asks why he'd need to train anymore, since he won the Pokemon League already. However, Virgil corrects him by explaining he was defeated during his challenge of the Elite Four. He didn't even make it to Alder. When Ash asks who it was that Virgil lost to, he finds out it was the Elite Four member Grimsley, a Dark-type specialist and a world-famous gambler. Virgil then tells them that he was wanting to participate in the festival not only to better himself, but also because he heard a rumor that Grimsley would be participating. Ash mentions that Clay told him about a rumor that an Elite Four member would be participating as well, but he didn't hear anything about it being Grimsley. Regardless, the chance to fight an Elite Four member isn't one any of the three can pass up. They continue to talk for a while, and when Go and Chloe catch up, Ash introduces them. Chloe and Virgil actually hit it off pretty well, due to their shared love of Eevee. Chloe asks him how he had any of his Eevee decide on what to evolve into, which he says that he let them choose for themselves. He's managed to catch every single evolution, luckily, but it was up to each of them whether they evolved. The Eevee currently with him even chose the path of not evolving at all, as it was happy the way it was. Ash also jumps in, mentioning his friend Lana has an Eevee, and it seems to be happy the way it is as well. Chloe makes a note of how that means there's 9 paths an Eevee can take with evolution, which Virgil likes the sound of. It's a nice conversation and does give Chloe and Eevee a lot to think about. However, the conversation must end, as it's time for the festival to begin. As usual, the battles will follow the rules of the Great class, meaning while they can use multiple Pokemon throughout, they can only bring in 1 or 2 Pokemon per battle. Ash, now having 7 total Pokemon to switch through, does have options, but we'll have to think carefully about which Pokemon he'll use per battle. Virgil also has to make some careful decisions with the evolutions he brings. The festival begins, and Ash's first opponent is a researcher. The battle is a simple one-on-one, and Ash decides to use his newly obtained Thwackey. His opponent brings out a Sawsbuck, and the battle of the grass types begins. Thwackey's ability immediately activates, causing a grassy terrain to form. The Sawsbuck runs in with a Mega Horn, however, Ash's Thwackey dodged by using acrobatics. Thwackey's fast-paced movements help it avoid multiple hits, before Ash has Thwackey use acrobatics to get onto Sawsbuck's back. Once in place, Ash calls for a Wood Hammer, and with a single hit, Thwackey wins the battle. Advancing Ash to the next round. The crowd roars with cheers coming from every person. Well, except one. A man in a blue and red suit simply looks at a coin in his hand. The coin is face up, and he simply notes that the outcome was predictable. The battles continue, with Cameron managing to take out his opponent by using his Hydreigon, and Virgil taking out his opponent with his Vaporeon. We then see Grimsley's battle, which ends quickly as his Bisharp's Guillotine instantly takes out his opponent's Beartick. The crowd is absolutely dumbfounded by how quick the battle is, but no one's exactly surprised that an Elite Four member was that strong. Ash's next battle rolls around and it's a 2-on-2. To start off, he uses his Scyther to combat his opponent's Krokorok. Krokorok is able to avoid Scyther pretty easily by using Dig to go underground. However, Scyther, using its fast-paced movements and after setting up a Swords Dance, is able to take out Krokorok with a few slashes and X-Scissors. His opponent then sends out a Darmanitan, which Ash decides to switch out for. Before he can make a decision himself, however, Darumaka pops out of its Pokeball, although it doesn't really matter to him, as he had a feeling Darumaka would want to fight its Unova counterpart anyway. The battle is a fierce one, with fiery blows exchanged constantly. Much to the surprise of the audience, Ash's Darumaka takes any fiery blows well, despite being an Ice type. If anything, it's surprisingly able to match its opponent in strength. However, none of its moves are strong enough to truly hit effectively despite all its power. Meanwhile, this Darmanitan is able to hit with powerful thrashes and hammer arms in order to combat the Ice type. Soon, Darumaka is backed into a bit of a corner, and the Darmanitan goes for a Flamethrower. Ash, knowing he needs to play a little more defensively, has Darumaka spin in a circle quickly while using Fire Punch in order to deflect. Darumaka does as it's asked, but this spinning move barely manages to deflect the power of the Fire-type move. Ash also notices Darumaka getting pretty worn out. Belly Drum doesn't seem to be an option right now, so unfortunately, he can't use that as a quick power boost. He's going to need to come up with something else. He thinks about the Ice Stone for a moment. He pulls it out and looks to Darumaka. However, Darumaka still thinks it can keep going without evolving, so Ash puts the stone away. However, that means he needs another plan out of this. Despite Darumaka's ability to handle fire well, the frequency of attacks is taking its toll. That's when Ash gets an idea. He tells Darumaka to use Ice Punch on the ground. In the audience, Go thinks Ash might be using the same strategy he used against Kiawe. However, there's a twist. As Ash tells Darumaka to hit the ground as hard as it can after it's frozen over. His opponent takes the opportunity to use another flamethrower. However, when the steam of flame hits, it only hits the chunks of ice Darumaka launched into the air. Ash smirks, before calling for a headbutt. By the time Darmanitan realizes where Darumaka is, the small ice-type headbutts it right below the jaw. The Darmanitan reels back, losing its balance slightly, only for Darumaka to take advantage of this by knocking it completely to the ground with a strong ice punch. Ash has won the battle. Cameron and Virgil's battles also go pretty well, with Cameron getting a 1-on-1 that he wins using Swanna, and Virgil gets a 2-on-2 that he wins using a combination of Espeon and Umbreon. As for Grimsley, he once again beats his opponent with ease, which seems very disappointing to him. The matches for the next round are decided, and Ash is facing Cameron. However, on Ash's way to his match, he runs into Grimsley. Ash tells the Elite Four member that he's really strong and he hopes they get to battle soon. Grimsley eyes the Kanto trainer, and then flips a coin. It lands on heads, and so Grimsley says it seems they will battle at some point. Ash gives this a raised eyebrow, to which Grimsley asks the name of his opponent. Ash says his name is Cameron, and Grimsley flips another coin. However, this time, Ash catches the coin before it can land on either side. Grimsley shrugs, saying that whatever fate had decided won't be changed by the coin not landing. Ash doesn't think this makes sense at all, but Grimsley simply says that battling and gambling are one and the same to him, and playing with fate has never steered him wrong. Grimsley doesn't seem too happy about this, though, and Ash takes note of that before the two part. Now it's time for Ash and Cameron to battle. It's another 1-on-1, and Cameron goes for his partner, Lucario. Ash thinks this is a good opportunity to test his own fighting type, and sends in Riolu. Riolu is really excited as it hasn't gotten to battle in a World Championships match since Bede. Plus, it's facing its evolved form. Ash warns Riolu, however, saying that this Lucario is what knocked him and Pikachu out of the Unova League. Riolu nods, and the battle begins. It doesn't take long for Ash to see just how much Cameron's training has paid off, as Lucario shows off a powerful new move in Flash Cannon. The two powerful Aura Pokemon exchange blows of Force Palms. They clash with Aura Sphere and Vacuum Wave. Riolu uses Double Team in an attempt to confuse Lucario, but despite Cameron not knowing which Riolu is the real one, Lucario is able to use its Aura Sense to strike Riolu hard with another Aura Sphere. Ash is really thinking hard about this battle. Riolu knows some strong moves, but Lucario is a lot more experienced at this point. However, he knows he's still got a chance to win. He calls out to Riolu, telling it to focus on sensing Lucario's movements and preserving its power. Cameron's a little confused by this, but tells Lucario not to let its guard down and strike to finish this. Lucario turns to nod, only to then see Riolu with its eyes closed, a lightish blue aura forming around the small Pokemon. The energy grows in size quickly, somewhat intimidating the final evolved form. Cameron calls for Force Palm, but as Lucario runs in, Riolu dodges the attack with ease, before countering with its own Force Palm. Lucario recoils, much to Cameron's surprise. He calls for a Flash Cannon, but Ash's Riolu use Double Team to evade just before the attack lands. Then, each clone fires off a Vacuum Wave. Cameron's getting worried now, and calls for an Aura Sphere, but Ash yells for Riolu to focus its power and brace itself. Riolu nods, taking a wide stance. Ash holds his hands outwards, and Riolu does the same. As the Aura Sphere is about to connect, Riolu grabs it. In perfect sync, Ash and Riolu pull back, Riolu attempting to hold the Aura Sphere. Riolu's aura shoots out all around it, as it and Ash roar in unison. Cameron stares wide-eyed as the crowd falls dead silent. He can see Riolu's aura, forming the shape of Lucario. The energy is difficult to maintain, so Ash calls for one final vacuum wave, right behind the aura sphere. Riolu manages to get a paw free and braces the aura sphere with just a single one. Riolu reels back a punch before firing a gust of air that propels the aura sphere at supersonic speeds, straight into Cameron's Lucario. It strikes Lucario across the jaw before it falls backwards, completely unconscious. The crowd roars with applause as Ash is declared the winner. Cameron falls to the ground, extremely upset. He apologizes to Lucario for letting it down, but Lucario is just fine. Ash then walks up, helping his friend to his feet. The two shake hands and smile, as Cameron makes a comment how this is payback for the league. The next rounds come and go, and Ash's round is decided. For the semifinals, he'll be facing Virgil. So they both head to the battlefield. For the battle, they both look into the crowd, locating Grimsley. He simply flips a coin, before mumbling who he'll place his bets on. With that, the battle begins. It's a 2-on-2, and it starts off with Pikachu versus Eevee. We get a few powerful clashes between Iron-Tails. Ash tries to stop it with Electro Web, but Eevee escapes with Dig, which hits Pikachu hard. Pikachu tries to go for Thunderbolt, but Eevee blocks with Protect, before it manages to finish Ash off with Trump Card. Next up, Ash decides to go for Thwackey. Eevee puts up a fight a little while longer before Thwackey takes it out with a Branch Poke. Virgil calls back Eevee, and Ash begins to wonder what Virgil will send out next. Flareon? Glaceon? He thinks he's seen all of Virgil's Pokemon, so he finds himself unprepared for the moment Virgil sends out a new member of his team. Sylveon. Sylveon immediately puts Thwackey on the back foot with Mystical Fire, which hits the Grass type hard. Virgil then calls for a Fairy Wind, but Thwackey dodges with Acrobatics. Thwackey leaps around as Virgil calls for Mystical Fire, before Thwackey manages to get in close with a double hit, a move that's much more difficult to hit with one stick. However, almost immediately Sylveon blows it back with a Fairy Wind, followed up by a Shadow Ball. Ash is backed into a corner, but he's actually smiling right now. He expected this from the Unova League Conference champion, so he's more fired up than ever to win. Virgil tells Ash to stand down, as he'll be the one to defeat Grimsley, using the Pokemon he trained specifically for that purpose. But Ash fires back that he'll be the one to face the Elite Four member. And then, he and Thwackey are going to make their way up to the Masters 8. Thwackey turns back to Ash, with a look that asks if he means it. Ash nods, and says he promises they'll make it to the Masters 8 together. With that, Thwackey turns back to Sylveon, before letting out a scream. Sylveon braces itself, but isn't prepared for the rush of blows that comes next as Thwackey charges in with an Acrobatics, and uses that speed to rapidly attack. Virgil calls for Moonblast, however, just as that's about to be fired from Sylveon's mouth, Thwackey flies in with a Wood Hammer straight to the top of Sylveon's head, forcing its mouth closed and causing the Moonblast to backfire. Sylveon collapses, and Ash is crowned the victor. The crowd cheers as Ash and Virgil meet in the center of the stadium to shake hands. Virgil asks how Ash is so strong, to which Ash simply says he's been traveling to all the different regions as well. That's how he met all the Pokemon he has now. Virgil smiles, telling him since he lost to Ash, that Ash better beat Grimsley for him. Ash nods, but he knows this is easier said than done. The finals roll around. It's Ash versus Grimsley, just as Grimsley had bet it would. They meet on the stage, and Ash sees just how disinterested Grimsley is. He tells Ash he makes bets before every battle. With a simple flip of a coin, he bets that heads he wins, and tails he loses. He flips the coin, and much to what can only be seen as disappointment, Grimsley's coin lands on heads. Ash says that doesn't change anything, and that he'll beat Grimsley no matter what. Grimsley scoffs, saying he's a high roller, and he never loses a gamble. There's only been one trainer that's managed to surpass him, and that's Unova's current champion. However, this doesn't matter to Ash. The 2-on-2 finals start, and Ash sends out Scyther to combat Grimsley's Bisharp. It's a battle of blades as both Pokemon clash constantly with X-Scissor. Grimsley tries to end this swiftly with a guillotine, and yet much to the shock of the audience, Scyther isn't taken down by it. This is the first time throughout the entire tournament that Bisharp's guillotine has failed, and yet Grimsley doesn't seem affected by this, at least not on the outside. Grimsley congratulates Ash for doing what most can't, but it's still not enough to break his poker face. With that, he calls for an aerial ace, which does manage to do a lot to Scyther. Ash calls for a slash, but Scyther is defeated by a Night Slash from Bisharp. Before Ash can call Scyther back, Darumaka pops out of its ball. It sees Scyther laying on the ground and immediately takes Riolu's Pokeball. Riolu comes out and the two immediately run to Scyther. The announcer for the event exclaims that Ash isn't allowed to use more than 2 Pokemon in the battle, but Grimsley stops him. He tells the announcer and the Rotom drone that was now also spouting rules and regulations to just watch. So, the crowd falls silent and watches Riolu and Darumaka help Scyther back over to Ash. The silence is soon broken, as Go nervously stands up in the crowd and claps for Darumaka and Riolu. Soon, Chloe joins them, followed by more and more people, until the small applause becomes a stadium-wide standing ovation. Darumaka and Riolu sit Scyther down beside Ash. Scyther thanks them, before looking over to Ash. He smiles, saying he'll happily let Scyther watch the rest of the fight. He looks over to the Rotom drone and asks if that's alright. It tells him it is, so long as Ash only uses 1 Pokemon in the battle. Ash looks to Riolu and Darumaka, who bicker between themselves. Both want to fight to avenge their fallen friend. However, after a while, Darumaka wins the argument, but Riolu stays out to watch the battle as well. With that, the fight resumes, and Darumaka is furious. Darumaka locks eyes with Bisharp, and immediately lets out a furious roar as fire explodes around it. Within the flames, Darumaka rushes forwards and delivers a powerful strike that takes out Bisharp. Everyone stares blankly, becoming silent once more. No one can believe that one of Grimsley's Pokemon has been taken out. Ash is surprised too, not completely sure what attack that was. However, Grimsley tells him that Darumaka's strange fiery spirit has become the move Flare Blitz. Ash nods, before noticing the damage Darumaka had taken due to recoil. Grimsley doesn't seem worried at all though. He calls back Bisharp, and sends out a Sharpedo. He immediately calls for Aqua Jet, which sends Darumaka flying back. However, as Darumaka hits the wall, Ash calls for it to spring from it and use Headbutt, a move which almost works, if not for Sharpedo countering with Crunch. Caught in Sharpedo's mouth, Darumaka breaks out with an Ice Punch. Ash then calls for Belly Drum, before Darumaka goes flying in for another Headbutt. Darumaka's attack actually gets the upper hand against Sharpedo, which actually makes Grimsley crack a smile. The 2 Pokemon continue exchanging attacks, and as Darumaka continues to surprisingly hold its own, Grimsley becomes more and more excited This is what he's been waiting for. A battle like this is all he wanted. That's when Grimsley calls out to Ash. He thanks Ash for the good battle, and says that Ash is finally an opponent worthy of his full strength. That's when he shows a cufflink on his suit. A rainbow-colored stone sparkles brightly. Ash begins to smile, as Grimsley mega evolves his Sharpedo. He says that he and Sharpedo trained in Kalos and obtained the ability to mega evolve. He didn't even have the ability to do this when he fought the Unova champion, so Ash is the only person to ever face it. With Mega Sharpedo on the field, Grimsley begins to quickly dominate. Aqua Jet, Crunch, Night Slash, and Poison Fangs rapidly rack up damage against the little ice type. If this keeps up, Ash will lose the battle, and Darumaka knows it. However, this is also the battle it was looking for. In a brief moment of levity, Darumaka calls back to Ash. It's time. Ash pulls out the Ice Stone and throws it as hard as he can to Darumaka, just as a Sharpedo comes in for an Aqua Jet. Just before the attack can hit, Darumaka begins to glow, the Ice Stone in hand. The Ice Stone disappears as Darumaka begins to grow much bigger. It grows large arms, which catch Mega Sharpedo as it's about to strike. When the light dissipates, Darumaka is now a massive Galarian Darmanitan. The crowd roars with cheers for Ash and his newly evolved Pokemon, and even Grimsley is happy to see this new challenge. Ash and Darmanitan look at each other in the eyes, and at that moment, Ash knows what to do. He calls for a new move, Super Power. With that, Darmanitan reels back a fist, and with its mass amounts of strength, uppercuts Mega Sharpedo. Then, before anyone can say whether the battle is over or not, fire swirls around Darmanitan. It changes forms, before striking a final Flare Blitz. With that, the battle is over, and Galarian Darmanitan looks like it's about to collapse. Ash, Pikachu, Riolu, and Scyther run up to help Darmanitan maintain its balance. All are extremely happy to have won another battle festival, but their celebration is cut short. Grimsley approaches and tells Ash he couldn't be any happier to have lost a battle. After all this time, battling and gambling had mixed for him. Battles fueled his addiction, and now, he's realized that's been part of the problem. He's been gambling in everything he does far too much, getting too caught up in playing with fate. He can't enjoy battling like this, and so he's glad Ash gave him this one last battle. No one knows where this is going, especially Ash, but it soon becomes apparent. Grimsley goes up to the announcer and requests the microphone. Once it's in hand, Grimsley announces something shocking to all who hear it. Due to what he's realized, he's decided to retire as an Elite Four member and a competitor in the World Championships. He says he's enjoyed battling for a long time, but he can't continue on if gambling is taking over his entire life. He then tells everyone to cheer on Ash, the trainer who defeated him, and helps him see that there's more to battles. Ash tries to tell Grimsley that he didn't want things to go like this, but Grimsley says he's happy with this decision, and he hopes Ash does well. He then tells Ash that the World Championships will have many strong opponents, including Unova's champion. Ash asks if that means Alder is participating in the championships, but he's surprised to find that Alder is already retired as well. Grimsley informs Ash that he, as well as the rest of the Elite Four, and even Alder, had been defeated not too long ago by a young girl who was, for a time, the gym leader of Opelucid City. This confuses Ash even more, as he remembers the Opelucid City gym leader being a man by the name of Drayden. Grimsley chuckles, saying he'll probably find out who the new champion is soon. With that, the battle festival ends. Due to Grimsley dropping out of the tournament, Ash actually replaced him in a rank, making him rank 319. And so, our trio heads back to the Pokemon Center for the night. The next day, Ash awakens to find a letter had been delivered to the Pokemon Center. The letter is from his old traveling companion, Iris. She invites him to Opelucid City, saying she saw his match against Grimsley and wants to have a battle with him herself. So with that, the trio are off to Opelucid City. This is where the events of Thrash of the Titans takes place, and this episode is still one of my favorites. So, everything up until the battle will remain the same, just with Chloe around. Go heads off on his own to catch Pokemon and meets who he doesn't know is actually Iris. Meanwhile, Ash and Chloe go to the new gym, where they find Drayden and his Axew that he's currently raising. Chloe makes a comment about Axew being cute, and after Go catches up, they head inside to meet Iris. This is where they find out Iris is now the official Unova champion, a fact that shocks the entire trio. Ash and Iris have an honestly nice conversation before they begin their battle. This is where things change. It's still a 2-on-2, but Ash doesn't have Draco Vish in this version. Who would he use instead? Well, Darmanitan, of course. I mean, it won him his battle against Grimsley and is an ice type, so why wouldn't he? However, he doesn't start with Darmanitan, of course. We have the incredible battle of Dragonite versus Dragonite. That's right, we still get that matchup, because despite Ash swapping out Dragonite for Thwackey, he figures Dragonite and Iris should meet. Who knows? Maybe Dragonite will learn something. The battle goes relatively the same, except Dragonite doesn't have Hurricane or Hyper Beam, so she mostly uses Dual Wing Beat Dragon Claw and, in order to set up, Dragon Dance. However, despite her gentle nature, once Dragonite starts getting beaten up by Iris and her Dragonite, she begins to get angrier, meaning Outrage comes into play. Dragonite begins to thrash against Iris for a while, but because she's losing control, Ash has to call her back to her Pokeball. This is when he substitutes in Darmanitan, who finishes up the fight with Ice Punch. This is when Iris brings in her Haxorus, evolved from her Axew Ash met all that time ago when they traveled together. Haxorus has become far more powerful, and shows off some new moves like Breaking Swipe and Psycho Cut, before taking Darmanitan out with a Giga Impact. They're both down to their last Pokemon, and Ash is starting to get worried. He calls out Dragonite and tells her he's sorry, but she's going to have to battle. Dragonite nods and looks over to Haxorus. The two dragons roar before they begin to clash. Dragonite is giving it her all, or so it seems. Soon, Iris calls out to Dragonite before raising her hand. She closes her eyes as some sort of gold energy comes from it. With this, she and Dragonite have a conversation. She asks Dragonite if she really doesn't like battling. Dragonite looks uncertain, but this is all Iris needs to see the true problem. She talks with Dragonite about its use of the move Outrage. Outrage is strong, but she isn't in control, and because of this, she gets scared to use the move. Dragonite's lack of interest in battle is really due to its fear of what could happen should it lose control. It's worried that it'll cause harm to those it cares about, and maybe even Ash. However, Iris tells her that her Haxorus is also a Pokemon that knows Outrage, and despite letting itself get angry, Haxorus can still enjoy a battle. It doesn't worry that it will hurt anyone, because it trusts her, and she trusts Haxorus. So, Iris tells Dragonite that if she doesn't want to go out of control, then she needs to put all of her trust into Ash, because Iris knows Ash can make sure she won't fly off the handle. When their conversation is done, Ash asks Iris to explain what just happened. Instead, Iris asks Ash if he trusts Dragonite. Ash nods, saying he cares about Dragonite and doesn't want her to battle if she doesn't want to. Despite thinking Dragonite could learn something from this battle, he was even thinking of having this be Dragonite's last, as he knew that regardless of what happened, Dragonite might not want to battle anymore. He was okay with that. With this, Dragonite flies over to give Ash a hug and tell him she'll be fine. And then, with a roar of determination, Ash sees that Dragonite wants to keep fighting. Iris smiles and tells Dragonite she hopes she'll get some enjoyment out of this. Dragonite nods, and so, the clash of dragons continues. Now, will Dragonite learn Draco Meteor? Well, no. Don't get me wrong, the first time Ash's Dragonite used Draco Meteor, it was beautiful, and it was one of my favorite moments in the series. But that attack was caused by Dragonite's Hurricane and Haxorus's Dragon Pulse, two attacks that neither have in this version. So, what happens? Well, we get some powerful blows between the two Pokemon as they clash constantly. Despite Dragonite's use of Dragon Dance, Haxorus is holding its own. That's when we get one last clash, as the two use Outrage against each other. The clash is powerful, and in the end, both fall, resulting in a tie. Both Ash and Iris are absolutely astonished by how this battle resulted. But both are happy to see how strong they've both become. They shake hands and promise to battle again in the Ultra class. So yeah, Ash doesn't win the battle, but he does get a new rival in one of his former companions. After the battle, they all talk for a little while, before the trio have to leave. Go is a little disappointed they can't stay, as he wanted to ask Drayden about Dragon-type Pokemon. However, in the end, they do say their goodbyes, before heading back to Kanto. Ash and Go's stay in Kanto isn't long, though, as not long after they get back to Cerise Labs, Professor Cerise tells them that he got into contact with Professor Sycamore of the Kalos region. Gherkin kept his word and talked to Professor Sycamore about Go's thoughts on the similarities between Mega Evolution and Dynamax. Sycamore is actually really interested in meeting Go, and has invited them to his lab in Lumio City. So with that, he and Ash are off to Kalos. The two get to Lumios and head to Professor Sycamore's lab. When they meet with Sycamore, he and Go talk about Go's theories. Go tells the professor all he knows about Dynamax and, by extension, Gigantamax. Sycamore does find it interesting that the Galar region has a phenomenon in which Pokemon will grow in size, with many changing forms as well. Sycamore tells Go that Mega Evolution is much more limited, as while Dynamax can be used with every Pokemon it seems, Mega Evolution can only be achieved by fully evolved Pokemon that are holding a specific stone that's specific to their species. Gigantamax, from what Go has told Sycamore, seems to be like Mega Evolution in that regard. However, none of them there have any clue what causes specific Pokemon to Gigantamax. Ash does butt in, mentioning his Pikachu is able to Gigantamax, which Sycamore does find interesting, as it means Gigantamax isn't exclusive to fully evolved Pokemon. The conversation is cut short, however, as one of Sycamore's assistants comes in and tells them that they've just got energy readings of a really powerful Pokemon. They tell them the Pokemon seems to be somewhere nearby a forest to the west of Snowbell City. They're unsure what exactly the energy belongs to, however, they did see something on how a small group called Project Mew was researching energy similar to Mew in that area. Instantly, Go is hooked on this and wants to go investigate. Sycamore doesn't think this is a good idea, but after some convincing, Sycamore decides to let Ash and Go investigate. He would have liked to have had his most powerful assistant go with them, as he's currently one of the strongest trainers in Kalos. However, that assistant is currently off with a friend, trying to get more information on Mega Evolution. Go isn't worried, though, as he believes he'll be able to catch Mew. With that, our duo of heroes are off to the forest. The two get to the forest and try to make their way through. Go tries to get in contact with Project Mew to tell them he's investigating the forest. However, he finds his Rotom phone can't get any signal with how deep they are in. Go sighs, putting his phone away, only for he and Ash to realize that they have no clue where they're going. The two try to look for any hints as to how to traverse the forest, but there isn't anything. That's when Ash and Go decide to use their own skills to figure a way out. Ash brings out his Riolu to have it attempt to use Aura to find their way to that energy. Go, on the other hand, goes looking around for Pokemon, until he encounters a Noctowl, which he uses Sobble to catch. Now, with Noctowl, he has it fly around to locate an exit for them. With the two working to find a way out where they need to go next, they eventually make it to a calm and quiet area. It's an open space with plenty of flowers growing throughout. The two decide to explore, after seeing some small Pokemon like Fletchling and Foongus. However, as soon as they take a step closer, the Pokemon run away in fear. Confused, the two keep walking. As they do, any Pokemon they see runs away from them. Even when Pikachu and Riolu try to go up to one of the Pokemon, they still run away. The only one of the Pokemon that doesn't run away is Go's new Noctowl. They continue walking when Ash gets an odd feeling. It's similar to the feeling he got while they were on the back of Lugia, or like whenever he found Riolu. It's like there's something calling out to him. He looks around, finding a nearby cave. The cave is surrounded by water, so Go brings out his Dugong, and the two head over to it. They get into the cave to find nothing. They look around, but the cave has nothing. At least at first. However, from behind, the two hear someone ask what they're doing there. Ash and Go both turn, only for Ash to see a familiar face. One he hasn't seen since Johto. Happy, Ash walks forward, stating that this is Mewtwo, a Pokemon Go has never heard of before. Mewtwo doesn't respond, but he does give Ash some non-verbal acknowledgement. Then, Mewtwo asks what they're doing in Pokemon Village, as normally no human steps foot here, other than some guy in a blue jacket. Go tells Mewtwo about his goal to learn everything he can about Pokemon by catching them, and make his way up to Mew. Mewtwo questions how catching Pokemon will help him get to Mew, to which Go states that Mew is believed to contain the DNA of all Pokemon, meaning that the more Pokemon he meets, the better he can understand Mew in the end. That's when Go also asks if he could battle Mewtwo in order to potentially capture it, as Mewtwo is clearly the closest Pokemon to Mew. Mewtwo looks to Ash, asking if he would like to battle as well. Ash nods, saying he's wanting to become even stronger, and he knows Mewtwo could help him get there. Mewtwo nods, before warning them that it was created in order to become the most powerful Pokemon. But with that, the battle begins. Ash and Go send out Pikachu and Cubone respectively. However, it isn't long before both of them are taken down. They switch to Gengar and Turtwig. Turtwig is taken down quickly, after being launched back while trying to use Bite. Gengar, on the other hand, manages to get a few Shadow Balls off against Mewtwo, before being knocked out by one of Mewtwo's own Shadow Balls. The next Pokemon to battle are Scyther and Dugong. Dugong's Ice Beam comes in handy, freezing Mewtwo briefly, but just as Scyther is about to hit off an X-Scissor, Mewtwo breaks free of the ice, and blocks with a barrier. Then, he uses Counter to send Scyther flying into Dugong, KOing the two Pokemon. Ash and Go send in Darmanitan and Noctowl, only for those two to be taken out easily as well. They both bring out their Galar starter Pokemon, Thwackey and Sobble. However, Sobble is easily intimidated by Mewtwo, so Go has to call Sobble back and bring out Raboot. The two Galar starter Pokemon leap into action, using Bounce and Acrobatics in an attempt to get the drop on Mewtwo. However, as Thwackey tries to attack, it gets stopped in midair by Psychic, before being thrown into Raboot. Thwackey is knocked out by this, but surprisingly Raboot hangs in there just a little bit longer. Ash and Go are now down to their last Pokemon, Riolu and Raboot. The two Pokemon attempt to battle Mewtwo, but their attacks do virtually nothing. Mewtwo hits Raboot with a Psychic and knocks out the Fire type, before telling Go that while his spirit is admirable, he hasn't put much into training his Pokemon to become stronger. Mewtwo then fires a Shadow Ball at Riolu to see how Ash fares. Ash calls out to Riolu to do what they did against Cameron. Riolu nods, catching the Shadow Ball and attempting to deflect it. However, the power of the Shadow Ball takes a lot to hold back. Mewtwo watches as Riolu and Ash, seemingly in perfect sync, attempt to stop the attack. Go also watches, completely amazed that Ash has managed to hold his own for this long. However, he can tell that Riolu can't take much more if things keep going like this. Go calls for Ash and Riolu to stop, knowing that there's nothing they can do to beat Mewtwo. Yet both Ash and Riolu won't back down. Ash says if they give up here and now, then they'll never be strong enough to beat Leon. If they want to become stronger, they need to keep going no matter the odds. These words resonate with Riolu, whose eyes turn a light blue briefly. That's when Riolu is enveloped in a bright light. The Shadow Ball's energy begins to disappear, replaced with a blue energy that grows in size alongside Riolu. Now firing off a powerful Aura Sphere, Riolu evolves into Lucario. The Aura Sphere hits Mewtwo, and it actually does quite a lot of damage compared to every other attack they've done. Mewtwo is actually a little surprised, stating that this is the power of a Pokemon and trainer, with a strong bond. Lucario's aura surrounds it, but both Ash and Lucario know they can't do much more against a foe as strong as Mewtwo, so they're going to use all their energy in one last attack. Riolu gathers together its energy into one single blast, before firing off the most powerful final gambit it can. Mewtwo attempts to block this with a barrier, but the combined power of Ash and his newly evolved Lucario manages to break through. The final gambit does a lot, but it's still not enough to beat Mewtwo. Lucario can't go on any longer, and collapses, falling into unconsciousness. Ash also collapses, completely exhausted by the battle. Mewtwo congratulates the two, saying they both fared better than most. However, there's a lot they need to learn. He already told Go what he needs to do, but he tells Ash that if he wants to become stronger, he needs to utilize that bond he has with his Pokemon like Lucario, and not have to resort to attacks that result in his Pokemon getting into the state Lucario is now. Ash nods, saying that while Final Gambit is strong, the risk of the attack is much too high with little reward. Mewtwo gives a small, almost completely unnoticeable smile, before telling Ash and Go that their adventure has only just begun. Ash asks Mewtwo if he could help him train his Pokemon a bit, but then he notices Mewtwo seems concerned. Something has gotten Mewtwo's attention, and it's definitely not anything good. Mewtwo tells them that they can't do anymore and must leave, which greatly confuses our two heroes. Mewtwo asks them if they are going to still pursue their dreams, which they say they are. Mewtwo nods, saying that's the best way for them to grow as trainers. Before either of them can say anything, the world shifts around them. In an instant, they're back outside Professor Sycamore's lab. who, alongside his assistants, rushes out to them. The two are brought inside the lab, both very confused by what had just happened. 1 second they were with Mewtwo, and now it seemed that Mewtwo had teleported them away. But why? Neither knew for sure. Back at Pokemon Village, Mewtwo is met with a horrible sight. Pokemon all over are being nabbed by men and women in black uniforms. That's when someone walks up to Mewtwo. He's a man dressed in a black suit, with a red R on it. Mewtwo recognizes the man and immediately tries to attack him. However, a psychic doesn't stop the man from speaking. He says it's been some time since the two had seen each other. The technology he had to control Mewtwo then failed, but he wouldn't fail again. That's when a Rhyperior strikes Mewtwo with a Mega Horn. Mewtwo's focus is lost because of the super effective attack, freeing the man from his psychic grasp. The man laughs as Mewtwo attempts to combat Rhyperior, saying that even though he's been in charge of Team Rocket, his Pokemon haven't become any weaker. In fact, they've only grown in strength. Now, if he just manages to capture Mewtwo, he'll have everything he needs to become the strongest. Not even the likes of that legendary his cohorts had to deal with will be able to stop him. Mewtwo breaks away from Rhyperior, but by then, it's too late. The last thing Mewtwo sees is a purple ball with an M on it. Once Mewtwo has been caught within the Master Ball, Giovanni smiles. He calls back Rhyperior before picking up the Master Ball. He states Mewtwo has always belonged to him, and always will. Now, he just has to increase Mewtwo's power further, and Team Rocket can move to the next phase of their plan. With that, Giovanni boards a helicopter that flies off into the distance. Giovanni smiles, looking at a screen. One part has the legendary Pokemon that Meteor had to face, and the other has 2 strange stones. Everything is going according to plan.